All right, welcome back to the program. We are so glad that you stayed on. And in case you're just joining us, this is Biz Check. On this Thursday, we are discussing how we are just going to manage our debt situation in the country. On the first part, we focused on you as an individual. But on this second part, now we want to talk about the national environment when it comes to borrowing and how we invest this money. And today, on the second part of the interview, we are going to be talking about debt management and fiscal planning, a conversation that is coming amidst a very heated debate concerning the recently approved IMF loan, the 253 billion shillings loan for Kenya, which the International Monetary Fund approved. Of course, we're supposed to be receiving the first batch of it by June this particular year. But we've seen Kenyans really angered about this and going online to pour their frustrations, calling on the International Monetary Fund to cancel this particular loan. What are some of the dynamics for this loan to be cancelled? Is it even a justified, anger for Kenyans to have at this particular time, considering our dynamics and our appetite for borrowing as a country? So we want to talk about that and much more. But of course, I'll be having this conversation with Kenneth Okwaroh, the International Development Specialist. And he is an International Development Specialist and also the Executive Director, Africa Center for People Institutions. Thank you so much for creating time for us.
Thank you very much.
Before I begin engaging you, Kenneth, I'd just like us to hear what our legislators have to say. We are all asking ourselves, the reason Kenyans are angry, the reason why Kenyans are furious about this is the issue on sustainability of this public debt. Is Kenya's debt sustainable? That's the big question people are asking themselves this morning. This is part of what some of our legislators had to say recently concerning this. All right, we will be, taking you through that in a bit, just to hear what our leaders are saying. Is it sustainable? But what do you think? Engage us on social media at KBC Channel 1, at Safin_Ching. And of course, we'll share some of your views as we continue. But Kenneth, I don't know. Let me just shoot it directly to you. Whether you think it is sustainable. Is it something we can manage?
Right. As I was beginning to say when we were beginning this conversation, that question, if you ask different people, you'll get different answers. If you ask ordinary Kenyans who are experiencing this economy, who have got to deal with the issues, the cash crunch and a reduction in public services and things like that, and unemployment, they will tell you they don't think the debt that our country has taken over this period of time is sustainable. But then if you ask other people like the international development institutions like the IMF and the World Bank that provide credit to Kenya, they'll tell you that the matrices and the calculations they do, they still feel that the country is sustainable. So it's a yes and no question. I believe the Kenyans who feel the economy and say if the debt is the reason why there are no jobs, if the debt is the reason why county governments don't have enough funding for running health facilities where they live, then they are suffering. But then you want to look at what people like IMF are saying, because the issue of debt sustainability is not just determined by say how people are feeling within an economy, but there are very many matrices. For example, looking at the ability to pay, is the economy growing according to them? And I've looked at a lot of this analysis done by the IMF and the World Bank, and they argue that over the past 3 years, when just before the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy, the country's economy was growing. I think it was growing around 6.3%, slumping a little bit in 2019. Then COVID-19 came in 2020, and then now in 2021, the way they are looking at things, they believe that the economy can rebound, and therefore, what is said is that the economy is at risk of debt distress, but according to them, it's not necessarily that it's unsustainable. Okay. But that is the view of the IMF.
It depends on how you look at it.
Yes,
it depends on who is answering this question.
Yes, my view, and I am with the Kenyans. I feel that debt is an instrument for economic development, and if at a given particular time we are looking at, say, the past 4 or 5 years since this second regime of Uhuru Kenyatta, everyone has been complaining. The pockets are dry. County governments don't have money. then what is the debt helping us with? So in my view, I think if we continue the way we are going, we have already reached the place where it's unsustainable. Mm-hmm. And what's going on right now is just mathematics and calculations.
All right. We'll come back and pick up, you know, from now we want to really dissect how much are we borrowing and what are we doing? And even looking at the history of our borrowing as a country, what have we done with that money?
Right.
Yes, but let's just listen to what some of our legislators have to say concerning this particular subject.
A big issue on pending bills. Pending bills are literally everywhere in all ministries. And this is a concern that was raised by members of parliament and with members of the committee. And we have clearly said that Treasury should have a proper roadmap on how to address the pending bills.
Is the ballooning in incomplete projects. Honorable Speaker, there are projects, the way the chair budget has alluded to, that began about 38 years ago. There are projects which are 10 years ago, which are 10 years old. We would want, Honorable Speaker, since these projects are now reflecting at the moment, let the Auditor General give us their values, their present estimates, and evaluate all of them.
The National Treasury must do what is called impact analysis. When you reduce a state department or an agency money, you cut their money, you must assess the impact it will have on those projects.
There you have it. That's the mood. Members of Parliament there just sharing their thoughts concerning this. And it's something that has really shaped the conversation for a better part of, you know, the last few days online. It has been crowded with a different opinion concerning this particular subject, our debt situation, our debt management situation in the country. I don't know whether you feel, Kenneth, you know, whether the fury among Kenyans is justified.
Yeah, I believe that people elect politicians to go to government so that they can sort out their ordinary problems. Things like food and shelter and healthcare and education and safety. If those things, if government is not able to provide or to assure citizens of those things, then they are justified to be angry. And they're angry because they feel they're paying the tax and they are providing government with the authority that they need to do the things that they are not doing. So I agree with a lot of people who are angry out there that where it has reached, our economy is not doing as well as it's supposed to do, especially for those basic things that they need or they depend on in terms of livelihoods. Even if you talk to businesses will tell you that there's nothing. The tax rate has gone high, government has expanded the tax base. We're paying tax on almost everything. But what is the return? Because normally the argument is government is collecting all this tax, is getting all this debt, it is investing it in the economy. We're saying we're doing infrastructure projects, energy and all those things. But what is the return to the economy? Because if all this investment was returning into the economy, then people would be feeling it. So that if you're a businessman, if you have a small kinyozi somewhere, the cost of power is lower, for example. You get, or the services that are required to do that business are lower, so that you get revenue, so that to sort yourself and also to pay government. But that's not what's happening. So people are asking, then why is government taking all this money? Because we are saying we are collecting 17% of our GDP in terms of taxes, isn't it? We are saying we are collecting debt, we are running towards 7 trillion plus, right? Where is the money going? So if an ordinary person asks that question, then they're justified because they're waiting for government to provide them services. And our analysis just indicates that we have taken so much debt to the extent that government is not able to provide those services. Why? Because we have so much to repay. Let's say you were talking here earlier on, just before this show, about private debt. The way people are taking money from all this money. Right.
The PAP loans that are just everywhere, just waiting for you on the phone.
Well, we are not supposed to compare private debt and public debt.
Yeah, true.
But it's a good analogy that you are paid 30,000 shillings. But before you get your check at the end of the month, you have debt you need to repay back like 25,000. So you have 5,000 bob
left.
So this 5,000 bob is for your everything, for your health, for your education, for kila kitu, you see. So in my view, that's what is going on in our country. We have made not very good debt management decisions in the past, I think almost a decade, like from around 2012 or from 2013 to now. That has increased our debt portfolio, which has meant that our debt repayment obligations are also high. So here in a year we are paying 900 billion towards repaying debt. Once all that has gone out repaying debt,
that's slightly under $1 trillion.
Yes, and our budget is how much? About 3.3 trillion. Then you have, public sector needs to run. So you need to run government and you need to pay salaries and all those things. What it means is what remains there for development, which is what affects the ordinary citizen, is very small. And that's why people are complaining, because money is not there in the economy. Services are not there to enable them to do business, to earn a living or to improve their livelihoods. And therefore, we're all stuck here. Government, yes.
Okay. So, Kenneth, how far can this complaining situation go? What impact? For example, the 200 people who signed an online petition against this IMF loan, what impact does that have? What other alternatives can Kenyans explore to really rubber stamp their
opinion,
their standpoint,
so to speak? I began by saying politicians to get into government to deal with these issues. Clearly, what Kenyans are saying is the people they elected are not handling the economy or issues of public debt in the right way. Normally, in many countries, you'll hear that somebody has resigned or somebody has said, this is our new framework, the way we are going to deal with it. But it looks like it's not happening. So that's what drove Kenyans to that rant. According to me, it's a big rant, because we are telling IMF that we don't want this money. As whom? We have already sent our representatives as Kenyans.
Exactly, that's why I asked, what impact is it going to have?
It has impact because the way democracy works, the way we're governed, is that we donate our authority to people who are in government. But it doesn't mean we've given it to them, kabisa. It can reach a point where we say, we gave you authority to do these things that we don't think you're doing them, so we are taking matters to our hands. And these things have happened. You went to Greece where they said we are not paying back money to whoever. You've gone to countries where people have gone into civil disobedience. We're not saying that is the avenue that Kenyans should go, but they have a right. They have a right to vent. They have a right to tell people who they feel are not acting in the right way with their government to do things differently. So when guys went on Twitter and on Facebook and on whatever on social media, they were doing that for lack of a place to vent their anger and their ideas. Because you would believe that in our country where there's a constitution with all these things about public participation, that it should have already been thought that this is a big opinion in the public domain that people need to listen to hear what. In some countries, you'd hear somebody has said, I resign, I have stopped that loan, until we hear what people are saying in the public, until we provide a better solution to handling these things. But that was not done. You get? But to come back to your question about how far does this go, in my view, what our government has remaining in terms of macroeconomic policy now is that. That's how we are.
That's how we are. The unfortunate reality that you're painting this morning.
In the next 12 months, that's how we are going to run our economy to stay afloat, because that's actually what we're going to do.
This is not a good thing, right?
It's not.
Yeah.
With COVID-19, we have conceded that all those projections about economic growth this year, a lot of them are not going to be as we expected. So in terms of revenues, we are not going to collect as much as we expected we are going to collect, isn't it? So how do you do development if you're not doing development through revenues that you collect from people? And we are not the country that has natural resources and those things that we can tap from. And also, we don't receive grants like we used to a long time ago, that we would say we are going to expect this country to give us this number of billions to plug in. It means the only mechanism remaining for government is debt, and therefore that conversation about how it's managed is very important.
All right. How has COVID-19, from your own perspective, worsened the debt situation in the country?
In many ways.
Yeah.
In many ways. The first thing is that One, when COVID happened, we needed money to respond, isn't it? So to buy those PPEs, to buy things that were necessary to protect healthcare workers, but also to do the testing and all that. So we needed an extra fund to deal with that. And therefore, that is when you had, I think, around May last year, when I think the same IMF gave our country money and they got resources from elsewhere. So that is one. We needed funding to respond. Two, COVID-19 affected the economy itself. So we are saying that there's a slump. I think we said we grew by 0.2%, while the previous year it was 6.3%. You see, so when the economy is constricted, it means government revenues have also constricted. Limited, So where then would government get money to continue running its projects, to continue running the government? Public debt, that's another thing. The other thing is, I think during the pandemic, our currency vis-a-vis the US dollar, which is the currency which a lot of our debt is held. Our currency has been weaker, and therefore it has affected also our debt portfolio, because if it was strong at some point and it gets weaker, then it affects the amounts in terms of volumes, but also the amount that we've got to pay back. What other way? The other way COVID-19 has affected our debt portfolio is, you see, when you have a budget deficit, like we are saying there, we have always had a budget deficit around 600 billion in a year. We usually plug it with what? With foreign credit. But when those countries
and grants
also,
which are not forthcoming,
when those countries also have problems in their economies, including China and the rest of them, everyone right now is looking at the economy and saying, how can we ring fence before we talk about providing financing to other countries? That's another way I think it has also affected our situation.
I was going through some numbers here that Kenya has received loans from those institutions like IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank to battle this pandemic. And in fact, the stock of public debt jumped by 1.07 trillion shillings from March last year to 7.35 trillion shillings by January this particular year. So, I mean, this is a huge, difference. One would ask, borrowing for things like COVID-19, to manage COVID-19, what triple effect will this have on the future of this country's economy? How long will it take us to navigate and maneuver and bounce back to normal? I mean, let's look at the future.
Let's look at the future.
How does it look like?
So, let's agree that COVID-19 was, and it still is, was a big shock to our economy, just like any other economy.
Yes.
And government did right in working towards stabilizing, because that's what every economist around the world needed to do in the past 1 year: stabilize the economy so that it doesn't fall. So there are a lot of macroeconomic decisions and policy decisions that government did, including taking credit to make sure that we respond. Because if we did not respond, and I think to a large extent, as much as we feel that government did not respond to the level where we wanted to, the things that were done that has made the economy where it has not fallen. So taking credit at that point to respond, to me, wasn't a bad policy decision. What I think was the problem is how then the money was spent, or how the money was applied. And that is a conversation that we've always had, and we have never had an answer, in which we are saying this big debt situation we have in our country, to a large extent you can take it back to how we use what we have taken. So to come back to the question about how do we bounce back, one, we have to make sure that the economy is growing again, and we have to identify what sectors we are going to work on to make sure to help us with rebounding. One of the sectors of the economy that has been working very well in our economy is service sector. And you agree with me that has been the hardest hit by COVID-19. Though even before that, you would hear that tourism numbers had fallen and things like that because of other things in our economic regime. But one way we bounce back is how we can use some of these monies that we are getting to help the service sector, especially entertainment and tourism and related services, to bounce back. There are businesses that perhaps will never come back, but there are others that we can continue to provide funding or who can give reliefs so that they come back and employ more people and grow and pay more tax. So that is one way. in the midterm, helping such sectors that have been hard hit. But we can also focus on those sectors that are usually called gladiators that can prospect for better and more sustainable growth in the future. And that's where you can link up the things we are saying we did with the money already, like infrastructure. Those many roads that are being cited, that is where the money went. Or the power generation, we are saying, I used to hear Kenyan say they produce more power than our country can consume. But we are the same people complaining about the cost
it's too high.
Of energy. Yeah. So the other way we can use this funding or credit is to see how we can expand our manufacturing, how we can make manufacturing work again, how we can make us produce more and sell outside there so that our economy grows beyond depending on agriculture and depending on tourism.
All right. Kenneth, we're coming back to pick up this conversation. The big question is on debt management. Yes, we take up this credit, but then how do we spend it? And this is part of what we had prepared for you. Just a small clip on what our leaders have to say regarding this, and then we'll come back and pick this conversation.
Debt is not rising exponentially. No, it's rising. And as you increase and improve your GDP, definitely the cost also goes up. It is one of the issues that, of course, we will discuss because when you are now doing the budgeting, you look at the revenue that you are getting as a country and also the deficit. And the deficit all the time is addressed through borrowing, whether domestically or also borrowing through concession.
The legislators called on agencies to work together on implementation of government's Big Four agenda.
Again, budget is about treasury. Parliament is about budget, right? In terms of allocating funds and the taxation. Yeah, that's what Parliament was created for. So if the core actor is not here, then it changes the whole thing. And it's not just a technical presentation by the director who can do it. We can do it for ourselves. It's about interrogating the policy, the thinking behind the issues. Why are we doing this? The issues you're asking about debt, where are we? Yeah, there's a new metric on debt. Perhaps we're probably not doing as badly when you now look at the cost, the growth adjusted, cost of debt.
Very fundamental questions there being asked. I mean, where do you fall in this conversation? Do you think probably we have missed the point in how we are handling the subject of budgeting, the subject of fiscal planning and public debt in our country? Do we miss the critical issues that should be on the table when we are having these conversations?
I think we do. And if you follow that conversation, especially by Honorable Amos Kimunya, you'll understand. I think the way we are continuing to make especially those debt decisions is not right, because they look almost like it's a preserve of treasury. There are decisions either between treasury and the president's office or state house. Folks decide that this is how we are going to spend, we are going to get this loan, it's going to be for blah, 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 blah. Whilst the best way it needs to be is to involve all the stakeholders, involve Parliament, who are actually the guys who are supposed to be working and approving budget. And you wonder why people's representatives are not part of the conversation about what debt do we take, how much of it, from who do we take it, what is it going to be used to do. And even broadening it to having ordinary citizens. This issue about public participation should not just be a box we tick, but it should be an actual thing, because I do believe that there are educated and clever Kenyans, economists and everything else, who can advise this government on some of the decisions around public debt that they are taking that are not prudent. But the conversation is closed, and perhaps that is an area that we really need to work on. I don't know whether it's